Hi, I'm Daniel Stern of Radio Spätkauf, and I'm this week's guest on MetaPod.
You're listening to MetaPod, where we unpack the web's most interesting podcasts and the stories behind them, hosted by Wendy Morrill and Kevin May.
Hi, I'm Kevin May.
Hi, I'm Wendy Morrill.
So I have no idea how to start this episode, actually.
That's okay, Kevin. I could start if you want.
Okay.
You know, we're headed to the city of Berlin with this week's podcast.
That's right.
So why don't you tell me a couple of your favorite things about the city of Berlin?
The favorite things about the city of Berlin is that from a practical perspective, it's super easy to get around.
Mm-hmm.
And from an enjoyment perspective, I get to go there once a year and hang out with lots of colleagues and friends. It's a bit whimsical, but that's why I like the city.
Okay.
And you?
You know, this is probably kind of weird, but I really like the water pressure in Berlin.
Okay, you've surpassed yourself on the weirdness from...
And, you know, combined with the water pressure, the water is scalding hot in Berlin. If you've ever stayed in a hotel in Berlin, I mean, am I wrong? Or am I just staying at weird hotels?
It could be both. You could be wrong and you only stay in weird hotels. But one, I've never noticed the water pressure. Is it strong or weak?
Strong. You know, you're talking to someone who lives below sea level here in Amsterdam, so...
Which explains an awful lot.
Right. I should have said that.
Yeah.
But, you know, other things, German pretzels, those are really good.
Mm-hmm.
German grocery stores, I really like those. Also pharmacies, and the chocolate department of every department store in Berlin is like a fabulous thing.
Okay. This is great. I'm still thinking about the water pressure, to be honest.
These are all new things that you're learning about me, right?
About you and Berlin, it would appear. So, right, what's your favourite thing to eat there?
Pretzels, chocolate, and probably white beer. Witbier.
White beer. Okay.
And you? Do you have a favorite thing there to eat?
I do. My favourite thing to eat in Berlin that I go to at least once every time I'm in Berlin is this falafel house place on Bankstrasse, which is near Los Angeles Platz, which is in the west.
Okay.
And they do the best falafel salads and things I've ever had in my life.
Is this like a takeaway thing?
It's maybe like 3 or 4 people can sit inside, but you generally go and get a takeaway, and it's €3 for this massive falafel wrap. Oh my goodness.
Do you have this every single day that you're staying in Berlin?
There has been one trip there where I did have it every evening. I would go there, get a takeaway, and go and have it back in my hotel room when I was working.
What were you working on?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because as people might have guessed already, you and I go to Berlin quite frequently, don't we?
Because we're cool, yeah.
As well as that, obviously, as well as that, there's a big trade show in the industry that I write about, which is travel, which takes place in March every year, and I've been to Berlin every year for the last 15 years, apart from last year and this year, because,
Yeah, it's one of my favorite cities in Europe, I think.
Okay.
A little rough around the edges, plenty of culture, good music, history.
There we go, which is maybe the reason why this week's guest, Daniel Stern, may have settled there. He's an American who now lives in Berlin, and he's one of 4 hosts of Radio Spätkauf.
That's right. He's also a stand-up comedian in Berlin, and you can hear a little bit of that in his show on Radio Spätkauf. And he's just an all-around funny guy, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit about the podcast itself. So it's an English language news show focused on obviously the city of Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess in a way it's targeted at expats and international, other international people that live there or are visiting, I suppose. And it covers local politics, public transport, urban development, culture, bikes, music, bars, and just loads of other interesting things that are happening in the city.
Mm-hmm. And I think you don't have to live in Berlin to appreciate Radio Spätkauf. The issues are conversations you might recognize as someone who lives in any other city in the world. I certainly find it quite familiar as a resident of Amsterdam.
Okay, so let's find out what Daniel has to say about the podcast and the city that he now calls home.
Sounds good. Start the tape.
Thanks ever so much for joining us, Dan, on this week's episode of MetaPod. Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to be with you two.
Right. So my first question for you is this, right? So we're sitting here, we're recording this on the second week of December, and our the UK government, funnily enough, has just announced, as they're doing with a bunch of new lockdown measures, including London, which is very close to where I am, that they found a new variant of the coronavirus, right?
Oh, fantastic.
Which is obviously, you think, oh my goodness, this is all just going to get worse again, or how are we going to unravel that? And the reason why I bring this up is that, we're sitting here talking to you now about a podcast that's got some comedic elements to it. And I've been mostly listening to episodes that have taken place since the outbreak of the coronavirus. And you managed to balance comedy with fact with other things, and I'm struck by how have you managed to do that when some would argue that things have been going to shit ever since forever, really, but in particular since since March, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Do.
Though it's a delicate.
It
balance.
is, and it's. I mean, the lockdown episodes we've done have been pretty personal, in that it's like us really needing to like kind of just reach out and talk to each other and get to our audience. And so I think that spirit makes the humor easier, because it's just like, hey, here's our shared personal experience articulated by someone with a sense of humor. It's not me trying to be like, what's the deal with Corona? And I don't, and for the podcast, like the humor is organic. There's no joke writing that goes into it. And I think that also, then it's just no different than trying to make your friends laugh, as opposed to, a prepared monologue or something like that.
Right.
When we do the group, we do shorter podcasts that when those updates have the little punchy zingers. And I'm glad that we haven't had to do those during this, because I think that would be really challenging.
Because of that, I mean, how has the dynamic kind of come together? So you are a stand-up. Mm-hmm. You've got other team members. So talk to us about them, what their backgrounds are, and how it's all kind of this melting pot of creativity, for want of a better phrase.
Yeah, the podcast started like 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago, 8.5 years ago. And it basically started as Maisie and Joel would sit and read newspapers and chat about what was going on in Berlin with each other. And they had the presence of mind to kind of like hit record and start putting them out there. And then over the years, they added another co-host, Andrew. Yuri came in, and he started out as doing architectural tours, audio architectural tours, which is just phenomenally weird choice. And then somewhere about, 6 years ago, I was doing a talk show in a really incredibly unsafe basement in Berlin. And Joel came to the show with his brother, and they were like, this is great, we should add this element. And so I joined the team, and we would be in the back of a jazz club in a practice space. I don't even know why we were recording there. It wasn't soundproof. You can listen to those episodes and just like hear saxophone intermittently in the back as we edit in and out of the news. And so, I don't know if I was explicitly asked to be funny when we started, but I do remember back then trying really hard to be. But those guys in those early episodes I was on, they would lean away from their mics anytime I said anything funny and try not to laugh, which was an incredibly frustrating experience. They were like, try not to ruin the audio. I'm like, no, the audio I want is you laughing. And so sometime around,
otherwise it just sounds like a crap joke, right?
Yeah,
If
yeah,
they're not laughing.
it's not how people want humor delivered for the most part. And then we started doing live shows, and that took the responsibility off of them to laugh and put it onto the audience. And then I also allowed it to be less stiff and more conversational and easier to record, actually, or easier to edit in the end.
So you said you you were just trying to it's like making your friends laugh.
Yeah. I mean, now that's definitely what it is.
Do you have German friends?
I do. I think that the stereotype of German lack of humor is it's a little over. I mean, they're human beings, just like you and I. But also, like, our audience, one of the members of our team is German.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, our audience there are a lot of German native speakers who listen to our show, which really shocked me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in the early days, you didn't get as much data as you do now about like how many listeners you have, where they're listening from.
Right.
But this was now, I guess, about 4 years ago, a little more than 4 years ago. I was going on eBay. We'd found a changing table. I was about to have a kid. So we needed a diaper changing table. And so I go into this guy's house with my wife to pick it up. And I'm going in there and she says, wait a second, that's your voice in the kitchen. And it was like my podcast was on as when I went to go pick this thing up. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, why are you listening to this? And basically, you know, he was a German guy. He'd been living in Sweden, wanted to keep up on German news and wanted to get it from a source that he enjoyed more than the German news. It was one of the nicest compliments I felt like we ever got.
Okay. So you, the four of you, or the four hosts that I've heard anyway, you're all expats living in Berlin or Germany for a little while now.
Well, Yuri's German. So he's not an expat, although he's kind of undercover. And Joel's Australian, Maisie's British, she's from England, and I'm American. So, and we've all lived here quite a long time. To varying degrees of success in our integration and German levels and knowledge. I mean, my role in the show when I first started was I didn't know German at all. I didn't know anything about politics. I didn't know anything about the news, and it was actually really useful in that podcast format to have some, you know, dummy being like, "What's that? Explain that." And it's I actually kind of miss that from our more recent episodes where like now I have informed opinions and new listeners we sometimes miss out on the chance to let people know some of the basics, like what the political party initials stand for and that kind of thing.
I'm interested, Dan, when you started, was there a level when you felt that you were no longer just an expat, but you were an expat that could make jokes about Germany and German politics? Or had you been doing that before you started on a podcast?
I mean, the first thing you're going to do when you get off the plane is start making fun of them. But it's to have, there was at some point, a few years ago where I felt entitled to having opinions about how the city's run, or that I think a lot of times when you're living in a country that's not your origin, you tend to sort of like, many people say, oh, I'm not allowed to participate in these conversations because I don't vote. I'm not a citizen, but I live here. I'm a permanent resident, you know, officially, and I have good thoughts on traffic laws, so I share them now. And that's funnier in the end than just like doing German accents and, you know.
Those are good too, though.
Oh my God, it's just such gold. It's always pleasing to everyone in the room. There's no one who loves me making fun of Germans more than Germans.
So you're an American living in Berlin. I'm an American living in Amsterdam. You have this, what seems like a really great dynamic between four people hosting this show. How long has that taken for you to develop, and how has that changed over time? You seem to each have your own nook, I suppose, in the
Yeah.
story.
Yeah. Although what I think has been really amazing is we had our nook or our niche when we started, that certain people's sort of had their own jobs. Like, for instance, mine was to kind of be dumb and be funny. And one of the really frustrating things is now they're all funny. And it's just like
You got some competition.
Yeah, I mean, like they got used to this idea that they could interject some jokes and be clever, and that's awful. But and then other things have evolved. Like now I'm comfortable reading and reporting the news, and so I can contribute more to that than I could at the beginning, which gives them more time to focus on audio production. Or we find these jobs, or Yuri just set up our little merch store, and now people can go online and buy our t-shirts and mugs and things. And so we fill in the jobs that need to get done as they come up. I've also, one of the things that I took on a lot in the last couple of years is finding guests to interview.
Mm-hmm.
Because the nature of the show shifted from just news reporting to more cultural, more bringing in new voices. Because when we started, getting news in English about Berlin was hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really not true anymore. We still have a useful service and people turn to us for that, but there are other ways to get it English, even just with your Google Translate. But even local papers now have English sections, and it's less of a necessity and more of a service, or something that people enjoy listening to as a podcast.
So do you have more opinions from English-speaking folks that listen, that is making it a different dynamic with your audience?
In terms of our guests, or
your listeners?
Yeah. What is the feedback we get?
Has the feedback changed over time? 'Cause maybe you have more English speaking listeners, or maybe not. I don't know.
I couldn't say for sure. I would guess actually that we have more, maybe the percentage of non-English native speakers may have gone up. We partnered with a local public radio station a few years ago, and that got us a lot more exposure to Germans and Berliners who are or native speakers or consume more German language content. But certainly when we started, there was no feedback. We had no social media presence, and fewer listeners, and people were like, I think podcasting had people had a different relationship to it then. Now we do get like tweets and messages, and some of them are incredibly mean, and but for the most part they are just very positive, and people want to debate or get involved. And the fact that we do it live, or we were doing it live, I think lets the audience feel more like they should and could participate in the information, because they're used to hearing people clap or laugh, or sometimes we get a Q&A with someone that we're interviewing.
I think what's as kind of related to what Wendy was just asking was that, given the style of the podcasts, do you have a difficulty in securing interviewees just because, one of the co-hosts is a comedian? It's often quite irreverent in places, or are they quite happy to, to be interviewed about sometimes very serious subjects?
I'm trying to think if we've ever had someone be like, no, that's not to my taste. But it may also be that the type of people that we're asking are, they do find it appropriate. And I do know when to shut up for the most part. So, I mean, we cover some, we cover the most serious topics there are. I think there's nothing we've shied away from. I think people are happy to get their voice out there. Yeah. And if they have time to do and any interest in doing an interview, there's people who don't want to be recorded talking no matter what. Yeah. And then there's people who have a project they're proud of, doing something interesting, information they want people to hear, and they'll get their voice out there. Recently I started being careful. Like if I knew I had a question that was going to be a little silly or pushy, I've sometimes tested people ahead of time, like, hey, here's the kind of stuff I want to ask you. And, there was one, this is the only time I can think of anything, even in that ballpark, where I had a question and she's like, I can either answer that or I can like not have my boss be mad at me. So, and I was like, we'll pass on that. Like we don't need that. So,
and I suppose just related to that again is that I just wonder more broadly, less about your particular podcast, but whether podcasts in general have kind of been are slowly being accepted into the mainstream alongside other media outlets when it comes to, some of the topics that you're covering, or whether they're still almost in the bracket of what blogs found themselves in for many, many years, was, there's a blogger, we'll get his question in or her question in a little bit later after the BBC and CNN, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, it sounds, part of what you're talking about is just access, like who will speak to us.
Yeah.
And it's surprising sometimes, politicians will come on our show, or, people who have real press departments and it's, I think because it's a chance to get their voice out there and recorded, people automatically get something back from that exposure. That being said, we've never asked, Angela Merkel to come on Radio Spätkauf or anything. So
why not? Why not Angela Merkel?
Maybe we should be more ambitious. Maybe we're not trying hard enough. But yeah, I do think the podcasts definitely, I think, have, because they're such a cultural phenomenon. How often you have that conversation at a cocktail party, like, what podcasts are you listening to? I don't remember a day where someone said that about a blog.
Yeah, that's true.
So people understand that there are podcasts that have thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of listeners.
So you've done a series of episodes on how to fuck up an airport. And this, of course, focuses on the new BER in Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just disclose myself that I work in the travel industry.
Same here.
Oh, wow.
And I think we both listened to the last episode very recently. The one, the lady talking about the penguins and the bullshit flights.
Yeah.
I was feeling that one.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you could tell us a great story about fucking up Radio Spätkauf at some moment. Are there any, good blooper or fuck up moments that you can now laugh at that you'd like to share with us?
Oh, I mean, nearly every episode is replete with them up to the moment we hit record. So, we are scrambling. There's wires running everywhere. I'm sweating. I'm talking to the audience. I'm trying to get to stay calm while we fix whatever thing's going wrong. But by the time we hit record, it's, it's either good or it's edited out. And oh wow, a blooper. I mean, we did once. Okay, this was we did have about 6 or 7 episodes ago. I think it was a live one this year or late last year, where apparently the audio was just incomprehensible for the first 10 or 15 minutes. And eventually, the person who had engineering was like a friend who was, I think, too shy to say it didn't sound good. And eventually he's like, we're not getting anything. And so the advice is make sure your engineer, if you have one, isn't afraid to tell you your sound is terrible. But so we stopped and then we started back at the beginning. I talked to the crowd. I was like, guys, can you just react enthusiastically as you did last time and just play along? We're gonna get that vibe back. And they were twice as good as an audience as they were the first time. I was like, we should rehearse this all the time. We'll do a dry run as an audience and we'll go through again. You guys can punch up your applause and we'll get it right.
So there you go, MetaPod listeners, how to fuck up a podcast and then do it right the second time. Get your audio wrong to start with.
Yeah, there's nothing like trying again.
I believe that your child featured on an episode or maybe more. I just haven't heard.
Yeah, that's been one of the pleasures of home recording is occasionally we get an extra bonus guest on the show. He's shown up to some of the live.
Can we expect to hear more from this correspondent you have?
I hope so. It's tough. What he considers news is a little bit away from basic what some of us consider news. So Yes, we could have a correspondent if we wanted to just have a dinosaur segment like every single episode, but it's really hard to consider dinosaurs news when they are extinct. I guess when a new dinosaur gets discovered or something like that. But yeah, we'll try and get him involved more in the on the street reporting. We're going to be locked down for the next few weeks, so I guess there'll be plenty of time to get some more content out of him.
I'm wondering if you have a competitor in Berlin.
Yeah, we do. We definitely there's actually a large number of people doing similar. No one specifically exactly the same. So there's KCRW, which is about to shut down, but they were a sort of NPR private hybrid, I guess. They have an LA branch and they have one here that took over when the NPR Berlin folded, but they're about to go. There are a few.
Are you involved in that? Any dirty tricks to get rid of them? Or?
No, I people come and go. I think people who shoot for the stars with doing news about a single place in a language that isn't that place's most spoken language tend to overestimate the size of their audience, I'd say. So a lot of people try and go big and they tend to not last as long. I mean, we have a lot of listeners and it's great, and we've built them over the years. So yeah, but there's also, there's some great English language podcasts around here that cover Germany in general, as opposed to Berlin specifically. I believe there's also one doing a daily short report, which is great. It's very dry, but it's, you could listen to that and it's a few minutes, gives you the news. There's people doing local interviews. There's aspects. If you like any part of what you get from Radio Spätkauf, you can find a second podcast being recorded in this city, which will give you more of that. Anytime a new one starts, I'm like, I get mad for like a second, but it's never been a problem. It's just always been great.
Apart from the recently opened Berlin airport, is there anything else that you've kind of covered over the course of your time on the podcast that you've also considered pretty fucked up, to use your term? Whether it's a concept or another airport or
right, yeah. We've been focused for the last few years a lot on the housing market here. It's something that affects Berliners at even any economic level, from totally unhoused up to super wealthy and buying and selling the places that we want to live in for a nasty profit. So that's something that ends up being, fucked up quite frequently. We, in less hilarious ways, we have to deal with issues of racism and bigotry and things like that, which are certainly a less quirky version of the F word. But there was for a while we were reporting, and this was a sort of popular topic, on these mysterious bike locks that were all over the city. Joel became obsessed with these, that all over Berlin you would find locks attached to things and no bikes attached to them. And we spent a long time, and there was actually a lot of good listener feedback on trying to figure out what they were, why they were there, why they remained, and sort of just documenting and collecting them.
So it wasn't like in Paris where there's that bridge and the love locks or anything like that.
No, just on any given corner, you'll just find a collection of locks attached to things without bikes.
Okay.
And so unraveling that mystery was a big sort of, you never know what's going to like catch an audience's attention. We had on someone from BSR, the local sort of trash and recycling company.
Okay.
And he just answered people's questions about how to sort their trash correctly. And I don't think I've ever seen our live audience just lose their mind for a guest like that. So he gives you some information about what to do with a peanut butter jar, and people are like, oh my God, and solving debates they've had with their roommates and spouses going back decades. It was probably like, if I told you like the spokesman for the local trash company was one of the most exciting interviews I've ever done, you wouldn't believe me, but it was. I mean, go back if anyone wants to go through our catalog and find that episode, it is a delight.
But I'm sure listeners can go back and look through other episodes, but can you give us the mystery of the padlocks? What happened?
Oh no, we've never. I don't think we ever found the answer.
Oh
No, it was just like this
wow.
open. It's just sort of because it's just was a part of it. And
Now's your chance to ask MetaPod listeners to help.
I know, and now I'm thinking like maybe someone has gotten to the bottom of this somewhere out there, or maybe it's time for us to reinvestigate. I was actually chatting about this with Joel the other day, and it's like I think maybe there's less locks around now. Maybe it was like a public art project. We've had a lot of theories. That people were leaving.
What was your theory of your own, or that was emailed in?
I thought that maybe people were leaving locks around in order to have them ready for their bike, rather than carting. Like if you go to work every day, you just have your lock there.
It's like pre-parking.
Yeah, saving your spot maybe a little. I don't know. We did find one place where someone had their, I think it was like a food cart or some sort of sales stand that they had locks left for. So there was like 3 locks we found that for. Probably what it was just like decades of people forgetting their locks somewhere, or like not locking their bike up, having their bike stolen, and just never getting cleaned up. I mean, that's the Occam's razor. I like Occam's raisin, actually. That's my new. It's not Occam's razor. It's Occam's raisin. It's when you take a juicy grape of information and you just and hypotheses and you shrivel it down to just the bare facts.
What about the humble sultana?
I see. As an American, I don't know what the distinction is.
Oh,
And
yeah, we're getting into deep territory here.
A raisin is a salt.
well, I have a topic that I would love for Radio Spätkauf to investigate, and I'm sure it
Ooh.
would be much easier than these pre-parking lock things. It is the mystery of why, and this probably goes beyond Berlin, but why is there such perfect sandwich lettuce on German sandwiches? The room goes silent.
The sandwich lettuce question. I'm writing this down so we can cover this on our next episode.
I have photographic evidence.
Why do you think, Wendy?
You're talking about that sort of where that lettuce is sort of like fanning out,
Yes.
like beyond the sandwich.
Exactly. It is precise placement outside of the bread, a little further than the cheese.
Right,
Maybe you see a tomato tucked in there tastefully.
right.
This is a German art that I would like to know more about.
So one of the things I think we would first have to address is this a phenomenon you're seeing in Berlin, or are you seeing it in Germany?
Generally in Berlin, but probably because I go
Okay.
there more often than other places in Germany.
So, because a lot of times, you have these idiosyncrasies, because to me, I also picture a lot of those as being fairly disgusting
Yeah.
looking at times as well.
Yes, that's true.
So, there's a range of perfection, but the German sandwich, and your listeners won't see this, but definitely there should be air quotes around that. Because it is also, if you open up one of those sandwiches, you'll see that lettuce doesn't make it anywhere near to the other side.
Exactly.
So
It's lettuce efficiency.
it's performance art, sort of. I think it's sort of like the idea of a sandwich being presented to the audience rather than like a real sandwich. I think actually,
That's
if
good,
you look
yeah.
in Heidegger, I think actually has a chapter on this in Being in Time. If I remember my continental philosophy class,
Bring it right back to critical thought here.
we will investigate that. I promise, on an upcoming episode.
Almost a series, maybe.
The German sandwich. Oh my God, that's kind of
Yeah.
brilliant. We can use
You
that.
thought Berlin Airport was fucked up.
We should do how to fuck up a nation's almost every piece of cuisine. I mean, honestly, like a lot of things like this start as like we have a silly question about something in our city or our country, and at some point we'll find out maybe there is a historical antecedent to this or some actual reason. Maybe this is sort of like some habit of like post-war when you couldn't fill a sandwich, but you wanted to feel like you had a sandwich, or East German rationing, like how to make that work for you. Who knows? I actually think also there's like foods which exist cross-culturally that are based on photos. Or someone's idea, like someone went and they came back like, oh, I had this thing, and then they try and make it and it doesn't match up. But if you took a picture of a sandwich, like a great sandwich you had at a deli somewhere, it would kind of look like that. You couldn't imagine what was beyond on the inside, so you just left it blank.
Well, this art in lettuce placement and sandwiches simply does not exist over here in Amsterdam. So
Really?
it's something to look into, I think.
Are there like deli sandwiches like on display like that at all in Amsterdam?
Yes, and they're usually of the disgusting sort that you mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe this is some sort of, I don't know, this is like a one-a-day calendar or something, sandwiches of the world or sandwiches of Berlin. I'll never, like one of my, I haven't traveled in a while, but I remember I was in southern France, in one of these areas where everything you eat is just like mind-blowingly delicious, including like gas station sandwiches or whatever. You're just like, where did they get that tapenade? And I got off the plane, I was starving, and I stopped at there's a sandwich stand at what's the name of this? The station where you transfer from the bus off of Tegel onto the train. And there's a sandwich in there, and it was like I bought something, and I remember standing on the platform and taking a bite into it, and like a mealy tomato and a sort of mayonnaise and maybe an egg, and I literally started crying because I was just like so sad that it's one of the most powerful emotional responses I've ever had to a sandwich.
I wonder, you said, you get inspired for taking on things and you're going to look into it or investigate it or, just do a segment on the show about it. How do your editorial meetings kind of go? Are you planning weeks out? I mean, is it just everyone throw ideas into a pot and we'll see which is the funniest and which is the most serious and all that kind of thing?
It depends on like our production schedule, like how often we're getting episodes out. But for the most part, if we're going to record on a Thursday or a Friday, we're start working on Monday. We open up a shared doc and we throw stuff in there, and we rarely edit each other.
Maybe not today. You didn't though. Google went down. But...
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that. They broke Google
for a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it was us, but yeah, Google broke Gmail and YouTube.
Yeah. I mean, we rarely edit each other, to be honest. I think, again, that comes from doing something for a long time where we kind of know our own voices. But also at the same time, the longer we've done it, the more comfortable we've gotten in editing each other. So when we were recording our last BER episode, the final, or was it, no, whatever, it was one of the studio ones, either last BER or our most recent Rent Cap episode. I felt really comfortable like giving Joel some copywriting notes where, like, hey, let's punch this up a little, which I wouldn't have done a few years ago. Or if I suggest a guest and everyone goes, what is interesting about that? Then it's on me to either like book them anyway or defend that idea. But honestly, not that much happens in Berlin. So the rate at which we want to put out episodes means that like it's hard to say no to any amount of content any of us can create.
Going back to the Berlin Airport one again, just because I thought it was a really terrific episode, and not least because I come to Berlin every year for a trade show in March and always fly from London to Schönefeld. And over the 15 years that I've been coming to that trade show every year, every time I come into land, you've seen this thing kind of materializing on the next to the airfield, right? And then over the years, oh, okay, there it is. And I wondered, because clearly you've been doing a series, how you managed to get access not only to that test day, because people know what you're all about. You've got this inherent kind of skepticism about the airport. One, how did you get access? And two, get to speak to people of power that had things to say about it. Again, because you have a fairly negative view about the facility.
I think it's a mischaracterization to call it a negative view. We were just stating the facts. I mean, it's like one of these things, like, yes, but like, how do you make something funny?
You have professed a love for Tegel Airport, I do believe.
That's true. I personally, yes, I did have a horse in that race, but like, we didn't do anything to embarrass them.
That's true.
They handled all of that. And I think at some point, in sort of the final stages of them running that airport, they knew their identity. Yeah. They knew who they were. And it's, in a way, it's not the least Berlin thing to be like the airport that just didn't get done right. And I think it's like anyone, if you got to own it. But in terms of how we get access, it's just asking. And I think that was one of the most shocking things I had to learn was just write the email. I think a lot of times I mean, you guys are booking guests now, and podcaster reaching out to podcaster maybe isn't the most intimidating one. Although maybe there's people but like you just write the email, and they'll write back, and they'll say yes, no, maybe. Oh, I have someone else who handles that, or whatever. But it took me a long time. I used to be shy. I'd say, Yuri, write the email. Can you write the email for me? Like, I think this would be a good guest. Just write the emails. People will just do it. They'll do it.
I think it's been easier with people in lockdown, actually.
That's true.
Not as easy if you ask people in the US. That's been my experience, but
because of the time difference, or just that people are less
I
giving.
think there's just less of an openness to people need to know who you are first.
Right.
So what are the big topics for Berlin next year? More on the bullshit flights and
reopen.
I mean, it's just our struggle to talk about anything that isn't COVID. Yeah. There's always the next project, which is, being mismanaged by the city. So we've got the Humboldt Forum we'll probably be talking about, or who knows what museum will be built incompetently next. We've got some elections coming up. I enjoy those. Something like an airport that takes decades long to build ends up in international press. So does, what's going on right now in COVID in Germany or Berlin or any city ends up in the international press. But local elections don't. And that's one of the times when I really, really feel like we're doing our job and we're doing something that really is valuable. That someone could land in Berlin having just moved there, and over the course of a 12-hour flight, learned a lot of details about something in their city that no one would expect to know. Feels great. When I had an audience member come to me, be like, I was at this party and I knew who the mayor was, and everyone was blown away, and it was because of Radio Spätkauf. That was one of the best pieces of feedback I ever got. So yeah, local elections are coming up, and we'll be dealing with this housing stuff, and there'll be a lot of fallout from COVID and finding new weird programs. But I'd rather talk about local artists and nonprofits and seeing what Berliners are doing with their lives after or during or whatever, and not just saying here are the numbers, here are the numbers, here are the numbers. Oh, I like the lockdown, I don't like the lockdown, let's speculate, let's hope, whatever.
Yeah. I've been a reporter for 25 years, and my favorite ever kind of assignments were covering the local elections, just because there were so many egos. Even if it's a small election, for want of a better phrase, there would still be massive power plays going on, and it wasn't noticeable on the national stage. But it was great fun to do. And the reason why I mentioned it, I mean, could you imagine having to have covered the US election? You are a native of America. I mean, how would you be keen on doing something like that if you'd had the opportunity, or is it just a bit of a Berlin airport, as you say?
Yeah, I mean, it's remarking on like current events or when my job is to be funny about those things, it's got to be something that I can find some joy in, even if it's sort of the spectacular terror of something, or you can find joy in a lot of ways. National politics in America is just, I don't have anything to add to that conversation at this point. I'm here, and like that's about that's about all I can say on that topic.
Dan, what are you listening to in your free time? For other podcasts or music, or I don't know, something else?
Well, my absolute number one favorite podcast is How Did This Get Made?
Okay.
I love it. If you're not familiar with it, they take essentially bad movies and they chat about them, sometimes in studio, and over the last few years they've gone to mostly live as well. I love live podcasts. I was the one who really pushed for us to go live. I feel good having that in my ears. I know a lot of people kind of like that, fly on the wall with a conversation, but I love hearing a performance.
Yeah.
So that's definitely my number one podcast that I always recommend, other than my own. Musically, let's see. The new Mountain Goats album is amazing. Getting Into Knives, I think it's their best album in a decade. Maybe, yeah, it's a great album. The Phoebe Bridgers Punisher is amazing. If you haven't checked that out. But one of the things I did for myself this year was buy a record player. That's changed the way I've listened to music a lot, because it's just, you just go, you dig through the crates, and that's what you're into. So today I picked up a Jay Giles album, a Gloria Gaynor album, something by Chick Webb. It's a compilation. I try to stay away from those, and a Joni Mitchell album as well. And it's just sort of that's what I'm been listening to this week.
And there are record stores still open in Berlin.
Well, they were open today.
Okay.
They'll be open tomorrow, and then Wednesday they will be closed.
Okay. Yeah.
But that's why I was stocking up. It's so hard to piece through. We even while in some of our soft lockdowns where we had stores closed, we would still have outdoor markets open.
Mm-hmm.
So you could go to like the flea market, Flohmarkt, and like crate dig there or whatever. That was, the policy here was like, if it's outside, nothing bad can happen to you. So, which I still like, I can't shake that feeling, but this is definitely going to be a more severe lockdown. But you're living in Northern Europe, that things shut down this time of year anyway. So I think emotionally it won't be a huge impact. They already took away the Christmas markets, but a Christmas market can happen in your heart as well as in the streets.
What a nice thought to end on.
Oh,
That's so not true.
whoa. Have you ever finished a stand-up routine like that?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I love doing those. Like ruin everyone's good time by saying something really heartfelt. Like that's just, I love doing that. That's a real way to just make an audience be like, we thought you were funny, but you're just talking out your ass, aren't you?
Now you made us cry about Christmas markets.
Yeah.
Top three weird ways to end a podcast.
Right.
I can definitely end this one weirdly by it's year end here in Amsterdam, and if you've seen me looking strange or hear in my microphone, there are explosions outside, which are hopefully fireworks, but you never know in
Right.
Amsterdam.
And you've turned off your phone because you're recording, so you can't like go and Google like, is Amsterdam on fire?
You evacuate.
So yeah, Daniel Stern from Radio Spätkauf, thank you for coming to talk to us here at MetaPod. It was a real pleasure and a lot of fun too.
Pleasure was mine.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. I look forward to hearing your many metapodcasts, metacasts there.
Metacasts, like that. Thank you.
So what is the difference between a raisin and a sultana?
I don't know.
Kevin?
I don't know. What is the difference between a raisin and a sultana?
I don't know, but thank you for raising awareness to the issue.
Okay, maybe that's the bit where we do cut out after all. Or we could just leave it in and people will understand just quite how crap we are at this. Okay, thanks so much to Daniel for talking to us.
Yes, thank you, Daniel.
We hope that the mystery of the Berlin bike locks is uncovered before long and that they get that email out to Angela Merkel, inviting her for a guest appearance on their show.
And I'm personally looking forward to that future episode on the German art form of sandwich lettuce. Please keep me informed.
Yeah. Anyone who wants to send in any lettuce, they can do so and send it to the Netherlands.
Yeah, if you're also a fan of German sandwich lettuce, please contact me. We can form a group.
Yeah, directly. Don't involve me in any of this correspondence, if you would, please.
No, we won't. Don't worry. You can follow Radio Spätkauf on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We've put links on this MetaPod episode page for you, as always.
They have some pretty cool merchandise too.
They do.
As we might do for MetaPod soon, possibly.
Yes, I've got a few ideas here, Kev, actually.
Are these serious ideas or are these Wendy ideas?
Those are both the same thing. But thinking that it's spring and summer coming up, I thought we could have MetaPod frisbees.
Okay, yep. Spinning away.
And since not everyone likes to play frisbee, we probably need a MetaPod beach towel for the people who just want to sit and watch.
Or listen.
Okay.
Beach towels, okay. What about sweatbands?
That's a very good idea.
For the tennis playing fans.
of the listenership.
Yeah, you're a big table tennis.
I play table tennis with my son. I wouldn't say I'm a big table tennis
You're a big table tennis.
fan, or indeed
Better than a big table.
better than a big table. Right. Some MetaPod merchandise might be coming soon, as and when we can finally agree on anything really, but in particular merchandise items. So look out for those. We'll put stuff on the MetaPod website as and when.
Yeah, check out the merch that Radio Spätkauf has. It's pretty cool. You can also follow Dan's comedy performance schedule at his own website. Again, you'll find links at the MetaPod site.
Okay, so enough about that. So we actually haven't done this bit very often. Who do we have coming up on future episodes? Tee them up.
Let's see. Next week, we have Ryan Anderson, who is the host and curator of a podcast called Sonic Excursions. If you're a space rock, dream pop, or shoegaze fan, take note and tune in for that.
Coming up in April and May, which is an indicator of just quite how far ahead we record these episodes, is Chris Malamphy of Hit Parade, which is a deep dive into the history of music charts and things like that. Plus, he does share a surprise that he finds in his closet. Stay tuned for that. So also we have Tara Boyle, she's the executive producer of NPR's Hidden Brain, who talks to us from her closet.
That's right. And before all that, Dan Maudsley of Paradise. I think he was also in a closet while he was talking to us.
Okay.
As all the best guests apparently do.
Yes, and which we clearly need to strive for ourselves. But anyway.
But yeah, we get at some of the stories behind the case of 2 missing British backpackers in 1978 in the conversation with Dan Maudsley, Chris Farmer, and Peter Frampton. And that's the story that's told in BBC's podcast Paradise.
That's right. Back to true crime for that episode for us. So that's about it from us for this episode. Thank you very much for listening.
And we'll see you next time.
That's it for MetaPod this time. Thanks for listening. MetaPod will be back soon with another unpacking of the web's most interesting podcasts. But in the meantime, make sure to subscribe at any of the usual places you find your other favourite podcasts. We'd hate for you to miss upcoming episodes, and we'd love it if you left us a review. You can let us know what you think of this episode by going to metapodshow.com. We'll see you next time. MetaPod is produced by Wendy Morrill and Kevin May.